Hello all. Hello to those who are listening. Welcome to episode 45 of Wellbeing Insights with Elite Mind Academy. And this time we are discussing the topic of suicide. Now, in those conversations, we tend to dig into topics that often stay behind the closed doors. And I'm just aware that this topic is much more sensitive than others. So just a little warning that I will be sharing some sensitive stories and some sensitive information. And if you do need any help at any point, please do reach out and feel free to reach out to me personally if you would like any other questions that you would like to leave outside of the live stream. So hello to all those who are listening. Say hello, say from where you're tuning in, and what's prompted you to tune in live to this session. Are there any specific questions that you would like me to answer? So where do we start? Now, when we think about suicide, very often organizations are asking us as well-being consultants, do we have to have our own suicide prevention strategy? Do we need to include suicide prevention into our, wider education and training for our employees? To what extent this is a responsibility of employers, and to what extent this should be left in hands of trusted, qualified, licensed professionals? So, my feedback on that can be really mixed because I think it depends, right? It really depends on the type of the organization. It really depends on whether the organization and industry and the way you operate can increase risks or create opportunities or access to means for someone to take their own life. Then it's a different story. But in other organizations where they are not maybe working in such a high risk environments, the approach would be, again, very, very different. So the broad answer is depends. However, to set the broader scene, I'd like to share some examples. And I think in some of those lives, we say that we share some insights behind the scenes. And the reason for that is that we are often contacted to deal with some cases where organizations don't know what to do when something already happens. And I would like to share a couple of those scenarios. And there's a bit of a trigger warning here, but also I believe it's important to raise awareness, because there is no company that will raise their hand publicly and will say, you know what, we, with best intentions, we wanted to improve our employee well-being, and you know what, someone ended up taking their own life as a result of things that we have rolled out. So we don't hear those publicly. Everyone's obviously want to protect their own brand identity and so on. And I would like to confidentially highlight some of those cases and experiences that we ended up dealing with. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Shafiq. Thank you for tuning in. Please do let me know if you have any specific questions that you would like me to answer. So going back to those stories, I've had to address one case where company has trained a group of mental health first aiders, and there was any process for how do we select who goes onto this course. It was pretty much like, who wants to do it? Off you go. There were some people with lived experiences of mental health, poor mental health, that have been sent to those courses as well. And what happened, the concern was really what happened when they came back to the business. And one of these new mental health first aiders, one Friday afternoon, received their first guest for a chat, for a conversation, and that person shared with them that they don't want to live. And Mental Health First Aid, of course, listened, highlighted some of the support options that are available for them, and Samaritans and some other helplines. And the person said, well, of course, I already contacted them. I already, spoken with them. Nothing really helps. And they asked to keep this conversation confidential. And they said that this conversation was really helpful. It really made me feel better. So please don't share this with anyone. I'm really, really glad that I've spoken with you. So, of course, mental health first aider feels like, pat on the back. They've done a good job. They helped and supported someone. And after the weekend, on Monday, they all come to work, and that person who had that conversation on Friday had taken their own life. Now, it had created a lot of noise within the organization because there was a lot of blame on mental health first aider because he hadn't highlighted and escalated the risk. At the same time, there was no any other support for that mental health first aider, where else they can go and where they can ask questions. There was no process back in the company for where else to reach out and to escalate this. And of course, as we know in mental health first aid, we are given the list of very kind of generic helplines and phone numbers to call to escalate, and there are limited processes to follow. So of course, it's in that case, the concern is of course for the life that has been lost, but also for another vulnerable person that now became at risk, and that is that mental health first aider themselves, because now they had to live with that responsibility that they could have done something, and yet they haven't done the right thing. And I think from this perspective, it is so crucial that as organizations, we take steps to prevent this from happening, those kind of scenarios from happening. And I think that's where our suicide prevention awareness and training can be really useful. And that's why when we are interviewing our research participants, where we're doing interviews with our employees and organizations to understand, their support infrastructure and their training, we always ask, would you know what to do if one of your colleagues told you that they don't want to live anymore? What is the company process? What is the procedure? Have you been given training on what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, and what's the process to follow from there? So I think those processes are crucial in making sure that we prevent some of those risks. And again, in that case, it's equally important that we are protecting the business as well as the individuals. And obviously those two processes are a bit different, but it's very closely linked. The other story that I'd like to share is actually, I think it stems from the fact that organizations doesn't necessarily understand fully what organizational well-being strategy is. And the industry is really full of kind of very superficial tick box level solutions that do not really address the real underlying problems, right? So yeah, we have, mindfulness apps, we have, libraries of resources, we have, gym memberships, yoga classes at lunch, and puppy therapy on Thursday evenings. But, if we are working in a toxic working environment, if our working ways of working are creating some risks and pressure and stresses for employees, then of course we cannot really patch it up with some of these, shiny apps and some of those solutions that just look good on a marketing page, right? And yet we cannot blame. Again, it's a lack of awareness about what that well-being strategy really is. And again, how do you embed it strategically, operationally? How do you embed well-being into your company's culture and daily ways of working and ways of communicating with one another? And that's definitely a big field of exploration, and that's something that we're helping organizations with. However, the fact that companies sometimes don't know what the good looks like, it leads to, first, choosing their own providers that do not provide for the right needs, or simply choosing solutions that are kind of more a bit of the same as everybody else does, right? Like, okay, everybody else has mental health first aid, so we need to do that. Everybody else has mindfulness workshops, so we have to do this. And in one case, I have witnessed a mindfulness trainer delivering a mindfulness workshop, very experiential workshop. And during that workshop, one of the people who were attending that workshop got triggered into some of the, as part of the guided meditations, got triggered into some of their past traumatic experiences and got into a huge panic attack. And the mindfulness teacher didn't actually know properly how to address this. And following that event, the person who attended the course relapsed into depression following that trauma trigger, and they sued the company because they have attended that training as part of the work development, and there were no any safeguarding checks in terms of who's supposed to be attending this mindfulness training, who shouldn't, who is it for. And of course, those checks have also not been done by the mindfulness practitioner, who probably attended some weekend course and delivering this for commercial purposes. But the problem is not that in itself. The problem is that organization doesn't know how to filter that kind of practitioner, professional, I don't know if you can call it that, from someone who's just there to kind of profit at the opportunity and make money. How do we filter those people out from the right experts with the right recommendations, who do have all of the safeguarding checks in place, who know how to understand some of those risks, and what do we do about this? So I think I really, really hope that some of those stories do illustrate the severity of what sometimes happens when some of our well-being support goes wrong, and where suicide prevention sits within that wider organizational well-being framework, right? Because it's specifically tailored to prevent some of those worst case scenarios, and to prevent some of those risks, and to protect both individuals and the business from those kind of examples. Thank you for your comments. I see there's a lot of engagement here, so just taking a moment to reflect. Right. So the issue is, nowadays most of the people work from home, and you cannot know much what's going on in their life about mental health, with various concerns such as burnout. The training must help for these type of risks, to protect everyone and help other people. Rob is also commenting, saying, wow, that blame for mental health first aiders isn't fair. It's so complicated. Mental health first aiders are better at helping others than most, but it really is stop the bleeding until the ambulance arrives. Shafiq is also building on that, saying, if psychologists or psychiatrists their own self, they're struggling on their own with mental health, how we will know this kind of scenarios and how we can help such professionals. Yeah, all very interesting and valid points. Absolutely. I think with mental health first aid, again, there is a lot of discussions now about legalizing mental health first aid at work. And I have very mixed feelings about this, because I think Mental Health First Aid England as an organization does a lot of wonderful work and kind of raising awareness and really educating people about and different mental illnesses and the conditions, and enable those conversations to happen. However, if it's not embedded into the wider support infrastructure within the legal framework, the safeguarding framework, in a way that mental health first aiders are chosen specifically for the right reasons, who are the right people to attend the training, and what happens to that mental health first aider when they're back into the business? What support do they have? What is the escalation procedure? Where else do we send people to? I think if that surrounding ecosystem is missing, then mental health first aid on its own can actually create some risks, as in that example, as I've shared. However, if it's done well, of course, it can be a huge benefit, and it would be actually useful for everyone to attend mental health first aid. And there are some organizations that allow all of their employees to attend that, because then you are not putting any individual on the spotlight saying, this is the person that you can speak to. Everyone is given that training, and therefore it's my choice to who I want to speak to, right? And there is a wider level of awareness that anyone is here to listen, and everyone is here to have that kind of wider level of understanding, to have those conversations. And in terms of, Shafiq, I think you're highlighting here a very important point about some psychologists and psychiatrists also struggling with some of their own mental health and some of the issues. Now, a lot of therapists and a lot of mental health professionals, they choose to go into that area of work because they had their own lived experiences. And it can add a lot of value, but also what that means that person needs to heal and process some of their own difficulties and some of their own experiences before they are able to fully hold other person and hold that psychological safety at work. Now, that doesn't always happen. And sometimes there are some of those professionals who are using therapy and psychological work as a form of self-therapy as well, and they get a lot out of this. But there's also other side of the coin, where people with strong, healthy mindsets in a way and good mental health go into this area of work, and actually they become traumatized by hearing other people's traumas and very, very difficult, challenging life experiences day in and day out all the time. Stories we hear behind those closed doors are not easy, and it's not easy to draw those boundaries and not to take this in. So absolutely, I think it is very important that when we are choosing who do we want to work with, when we are choosing the right providers, the right psychologists, right therapists, right coaches to work with, that we really know how to do the wider background research in knowing whether this person is not necessarily just qualified, but whether they are actually able to hold all of the reality of the experience in the right way, and what is the outcome? Are they able to equip people to help themselves, or why are they really doing this for? And it's not easy to judge, and it's not really easy to understand this. And that's why when we are partnering with our organizations for our consulting work, for Wellbeing Partnership, we actually offer to do that screening, and we really take entire selection process on our shoulders and say, right, we just see what kind of solution we need. We will find the right people. We can vet them. We can find the right experts who can come on board and deliver what you need. And we take the responsibility of placing that person in your business if anything goes wrong. So we can really reduce those risks by taking away and having experts actually do those checks. So I think that's very important. I think another important point was raised here about people working from home, and actually us not having anymore some of the systems for check-ins and not having a visibility about the state of that individual. And definitely when we are when we meet in person, you can really see people's body language. You can observe their behaviors in the office, right? Are they behaving somehow differently to their usual normal selves? But when we are just tuning in via the screen, it's very difficult to maybe observe some of these nuances. And we don't always know what's happening in that personal life of those individuals. And I think it's so crucial then from a business point of view to create the support ecosystem where actually we're encouraging people to socialize without necessarily just talking about work. And of course, if that's social activity can be done in person, that's great. But of course, I think it's important to have a mix of both. And people do get comfortable working from home, and sometimes they don't necessarily want to engage and go into the office. So it's very important that we have the boundaries and we have opportunity for people to share their concerns, to share their struggles and their experiences. And there are simple little things that we can do. Let's say in our team, we have this rule that at the beginning of every meeting, no one is allowed to talk business until every person checked in to see how they are. And we share our, we call it our wins and learns of the week. So, if there is something great happen, we share that. But also if we are struggling with something, if we are experiencing some difficulties, we also share that. So it's, it just creates this habit of everyone, and it's not just optional. If you want, you share, but every person is asked to check in, and only when everybody had a say, we then go and discuss the business. And it creates this habit of trust that, when we do, and people start sharing first, small little irrelevant things about, something new purchase or some little gift that they got, and then they start sharing more and more personal things as the time goes by, as they get kind of comfortable and see how it's being received when somebody else shares some of their struggles. And it really does a lot to create that safety and trust, and encourages people to reach out to each other for that support. So there's definitely a lot of things that can be done to provide that support even when we're working remotely. Right. Shafiq says that, yes, even when you meet someone physically, you can use your intuition and find out quick what must be wrong with this person, and can ask and offer your help. I'm just picking on the language here, Shafiq, and just give me permission here, right? I think, here it's saying like, what must be wrong with this person, right? It can be quite critical language when you say what's wrong. And if we are kind of constantly looking for, what's wrong with you kind of attitude, it can create a lot of hostility, and it can create people kind of reluctant from people to be their authentic selves, right? If they are being kind of judged, and someone is kind of looking what's the problem kind of way. What we really need to look at how we tailor and tweak that language in a way that we can definitely notice, I would say, more changes than anything, right? Because I think first sign of poor mental health is observing that the person is not like their usual selves, right? And of course, we can see the list of behaviors that sometimes say, oh, the productivity levels change. Now somebody is not looking after their, maybe someone is looking disheveled, maybe, X, Y, Z of the list of symptoms. But, for some people, when you look at that list of symptoms, it's normal. That's how they are when they are their best selves, right? But for somebody else, those might be concerns. So I think when we spend more time with people socializing, we really get to know who they are, and how they come across, and how they are when they are in their feeling their best, so that when something appears out of character, that's when we should ask, like, are you okay? But instead of coming that from the place of, what's the problem and is there something wrong, actually just feeding the information back to them and saying, oh, I have noticed that, you are doing X, Y, Z. Well, actually, I've never seen you doing that before. Are you okay? Has anything changed? And just really feeding that back to the person, what you're observing. Oh, I'm observing you are doing X, Y, Z, or you are looking X, Y, Z. Is everything okay? And just really allowing that safe space for person to be heard from that perspective. And I think very often when we ask question in some of our interviews, if your friend, colleague, family member, your child, for God's sake, would come to you and say, I don't want to live and I'm going to kill myself, do you actually know what to do and what to say, and what not to do and what not to say? And that, I believe, is our big failure as a society, that we don't equip people with that knowledge. We don't teach this at schools. We don't give that training in organizations. Some companies obviously do, but it's not a standard, right? It's not a standard practice that everyone would be given that training. And then when the worst happens, then that's usually too late, right? Then we wake up, but there has already been lives lost. And in the same way, I think, it's when someone takes a life, and you often hear, family, friends saying like, oh, I this came out of nowhere, there was no any warning signs, I had no clue, I was just having a drink with them yesterday in a pub and chatting and laughing and all seemed great. So the fact that suicide comes to us as a big surprise is a clear sign of our failure as a society to educate about what those signs are and what to look out for. Because I promise you, there are always signs. There are very clear signs, and they are always there. But we are blind to that because we don't know what to watch out for. We don't know what it looks like. And therefore, it comes as a surprise when that happens. If we look back, of course, there might be some ways of looking at that. So definitely. And the most important thing that we, each and every one of us, can do, if anyone shares some struggles and some difficulties with them, is first not to jump in with the solutions, with telling them what to do, telling them who to call, but just really be there and just listen and appreciate the fact that they've shared that with you. The first thing that you can say is just a very simple thank you. Thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you for sharing how you're feeling. And for me, from a therapist point of view, from a coach point of view, it's always really humbling when people open up to you and share their life stories and experiences and thoughts that they have never shared with anyone, right? So put yourself in that place where you feel, what a privilege, right? This person has chosen me to share their concerns with you, right? And I think if you take that conversation from this place and just allowing them to be heard, to be held in that safety, without judgment, without questioning, why exactly you want to do this and why you shouldn't, and any kind of judgment or comments about what they should and shouldn't do. It can really do a lot of good, just simply teaching each other how to truly listen and how to ask the right questions, like how you feel, how you're feeling, how are you coping with this, what have you done so far about this, what worked, what didn't work, or have you considered doing X? Would you like me to help you with that? Would you like me to come with you to that? What else can I do? What would you like me to do? Is there any systems that we can put in place so that when you feel vulnerable, when you feel like you are about to harm yourself, that you can reach out to me, and what would you like me to do then, right? So there's a lot of things that we can do just by simply asking those right questions and really unpacking, how is this individual coping, what are they already doing, and therefore how can you build on that, how can we support their resilience and their belief in themselves and in humanity, and that something can be done. Because most of the time people take their life because they have lost hope. And suicide is not always a sign of poor mental health. There's a huge proportion of people who take their own life because they are in very unfortunate financial situations, difficult life scenarios from which they don't feel like there is a way out, right? So if we can just allow persons space to see different options, then they can recover the hope. And it's so important that it comes from them, that it's not just, me telling you what to do, but me creating space for you to be able to see those options for themselves, because that's the only way we can act on some of those potential solutions, rather than just feeling like, being told to to behave in a specific way. So yeah, so Taking a step back, well, why do I often talk about suicides, and why am I so passionate about this topic and this area of work? Well, some of you'll know that I'm from Lithuania originally, and Lithuania has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. And growing up, I've witnessed few people taking their own lives. Not directly. I've not seen it closely, thankfully. But still, for a child, I think it's just knowing that some of the close people to you are taking their own lives. It can really create a lot of questions and a lot of kind of distorted points of view about what is life, and what is death, and what is right and what is wrong. And in Lithuania there is this kind of taboo that, like, everyone knows about this, like there are so many suicides, and yet people don't really talk about the kind of underlying causes. There's still kind of a lot of judgment and blame, and it's nearly seen as, oh well, this person just couldn't take it anymore, so off they go. It's just kind of like normal part of life. So I haven't really questioned a lot of those experiences until I actually came to UK, and I came to London. And for me, needing to start my new life in a foreign country without even speaking the language, and then later when I started working in the charity called Matri that supports suicidal people, only there it really hit me that, hold on a moment, like, I'm going through these very difficult, challenging life scenarios and this really difficult situation in my life, but you know what? I never felt this way. I never felt like I want to take my own life. So what is the difference when you are sitting across someone in that respite center? There was this one moment that I'll never forget, that I had the conversation with this person that you look at them and you think, well, this guy has it all: prestigious career and good job and children and family and good looks, sense of humor, you name it, right? And there they are in this respite center, not wanting to live. And I'm, on the other hand, I'm on my own in a foreign country trying to survive. And yet I have never felt this way. I've never felt like life is too much. So why? And I had really mixed feelings, because on one hand, it made me really grateful for the upbringing and the education that I had. So I had that strong belief and mindset and resilience to kind of deal with this in a way that doesn't really affect me to that point. But on the other hand, I also felt very guilty, because it felt like I have something that these people need so much, and I don't know what is it that we needed to give. I don't know what is it that we need to give to the society, to other people, so they can also have the same level of belief and resilience and trust their own judgment and the situation, and that kind of wider belief that things can be okay regardless. So I've spent many years researching that kind of, what is the difference that makes the difference, right, between those people who can kind of cope with challenges and pressures, and those who are struggling with the same scenarios. And yeah, it's been very interesting until there's a lot of kind of different aspects of resilience research that looks at our ability to self-regulate, that looks at our behavioral resilience and kind of ability to adapt to different changing scenarios, but also, ability to implement our knowledge in theory and practice, right? Many people know some people in your network, I'm sure you'll know people who are attending a lot of courses and training, and yet, who are maybe in lifelong therapy, and yet their lives do not get any better, right? Because they cannot apply what they know in practice. And for many years, I kind of looked at those kind of three lenses here of resilience, of kind of internal self-regulation, external behavioral resilience, and this other aspect of kind of knowledge into practice as an answer, as a way to kind of build these skills and abilities. But at the end of the day, you realize that environment will always be bigger than us. And, you can place the most vulnerable person in very supportive environment, and you know what, they will still thrive. And you can take the strongest person, the most resilient, with the strongest positive mindset, you place them under too much pressure in a toxic working environment for too long, and they will still burn out and crack at some point. So individual resilience is just one small aspect of this big picture. And that's where organizations really sit, because if we know how to create our organizational environment in a way that supports that individual well-being and resilience, we can really use our workplaces as a positive intervention for building health, well-being, for promoting healthy habits and self-care, and also in that nature as a success measure of that, there will be a reduction in suicide rates. So this ecosystemic view is so important, and we cannot really look at going back to some comments here in terms of like what's wrong with this individual. We really need to look at what's wrong with our society, right? And how this person got here to this place where they are, why they are feeling the way they are feeling. And therefore, what are all these other ecosystemic environmental factors that are at play that we can then turn it upside down and look at, okay, so what needs to happen with our environment so this does not happen? And that includes awareness and education, making sure that each and every one of us know what to do and what to say when somebody shares with them some struggles. And this does not necessarily limit it to someone feeling suicidal, just in general. If someone is struggling with some of their other mental health struggles or just some other personal issues, how do we really support them in the right way? But also, what is the right action to take, right? What are the practical steps that not we can do for that other person, but that person can take for themselves, and how we can really enable that? How can we support them to have that agency and that belief so they can kind of place their life in the best hands possible, their own hands, right? Because I think the mental health system can create a lot of dependencies and a lot of kind of these very unhealthy attachments to external support ecosystems, to medication, without actually enabling person to become better and to do better. So it is so important that we have that awareness, but we also have very practical action that builds that individual agency. And yeah, something that upsets me a lot when I hear in organizations, and when I ask about what happens when somebody shares their struggles or concerns, we say, oh, we have referral system. Yeah. And what is your referral system? And here is your Samaritan's number. Here is your Mind's charity number, right? But we are only giving them the same pieces of information that they can find on internet, that they can just Google and it's already there, and they might have already tried, or they are aware of it, and they will never use it, right? There are reasons for that. So if we are sending people to the same helplines, to the same kind of publicly available things that person is already aware of, then it's not real help. Of course, it's better than nothing, and of course, it's great to have awareness of those helplines to access, but within organizations, we need to create our own ecosystem where we know where exactly, who this person can speak to. And it's not enough just to reach out, to tell person, oh, if you're struggling, reach out. We need to know how to notice the signs so we can reach in before it's too late. And I think that would be probably a final message to end in terms of what needs to happen. So so please feel free to share any other comments. I'd love to hear, what is your biggest takeaway? What are you taking away from this chat? What would you do differently? What do you think needs to happen in organizations that we need to do differently at company level? Right. So Rob says, ask questions with kindness and listen without judgment. Beautiful summary. Thank you, Rob. So also just to let you know, I have also been interviewed on the radio for Jordan's Legacy, and the show will go live this evening at 7 p.m. So I will also share a link with you if you'd like to hear a little bit more of my insights in that interview radio format. I will share that. And any other questions, please do let me know. So Rob is asking, should organizations triage a case? There must be a point where you need external help. Absolutely. And I think this is really, really important. We are often putting too much responsibility and too much pressure on organizations that now, every line manager has to also become a therapist, and, everyone needs to speak to everyone at work about their personal struggles. And that's not always the case. Different companies will, of course, have their own different boundaries on how much they want to support employees internally, and where those boundaries are, where we need to pass on people elsewhere. But I think we always need to have those three elements here. It's like, what is it that we can do to support this individual to help themselves, to build their own well-being, their own awareness? What are things that we can do as an organization to support them? And where are the limits of our boundaries? And how exactly does that referral system look like, where we are sending people to a third party? So I think absolutely it's very important. And like I mentioned, it's not good enough just to give people a Samaritan's number, for example, and so on. We really need to make sure that we have a support system that we can rely on, and in the best way. I know many companies have, let's say, employee assistance programs. What we find issue is that most people don't actually use that. It's not delivered in a way and in a format that is accessible to people. They would not choose to speak to someone on the phone. So there's so many different obstacles there in terms of how that support is delivered. But the other biggest limitation of employee assistance programs is that you don't have any feedback back to the company, right? So absolutely, we need to maintain confidentiality, and we need to make sure that we're protecting the individual and they have a right to have that confidential information. However, if we don't have a feedback loop that allows employees to raise their concerns confidentially, and that feedback in some sort of confidential aggregate form doesn't get back to organization, then we are potentially, as organization, causing harm, and we don't even know about this, and we have no way and feedback system to fix that. So I think it's very important that, when we have some of those pressures and some of this, where our ways of working in environment doesn't necessarily support us, that we have a outlet to go. But the way we, for example, when we offer our confidential well-being assessments, we still provide data back to the organization on a regular basis to say, right, this month, we have seen an increase of your people asking for help with finances, right? So maybe that's an opportunity to put in some financial support and financial education workshop, right? So there's no personal information there. Everything is still kept confidential. However, we are highlighting concerns in a confidential aggregate that people are bringing to us, so we can then recommend the right solutions and the right experts to then come in on board. And in the same way, when, let's say, line managers have conversations with their employees and they open up about some of their struggles, where do they go, right? There needs to be a system where we say, right, this is my role as a manager, this is what I can do, these are some other support ecosystem and other things that are available for you in organization, and there are some other expert support options that we can refer people to. Whether organization pays for that or not, of course, it really depends on the business, but I always insist that we do need to have a system to send people for a professional external help. Right, what else? So Paul, what do you do to offload the pressures of helping so many with this topic? Thank you. This is a wonderful question. I think definitely there is a lot of self-care practices that we need to engage in when we are listening and hearing, others offload all the time. And I remember some of the things for me, some of these kind of heaviest experiences where when I was working as when I was working at Maytree, charity with suicidal people. And for me, I had to have very kind of clear practices and rituals in a way before I would go into that building, and kind of rituals after that to really kind of clear your mind and really make sure that I have those very, very clear boundaries of, this is not mine, this is, this is a separate thing, this is the role that I play to support that, and making a very clear intention that, this is my role, this is not my problem, and this will not affect me emotionally. Well, okay, that's probably, I probably said that in the wrong way. It will do. Like, you cannot be completely blank. We are humans. We will feel other people suffering and so on. But having those kind of clear boundaries to say that I will feel it only to the point and only to the degree that it allows me to empathize with them and understand their reality, so that I can help them or direct them to appropriate supports, but I will not carry that load with me. So setting those intentions in advance really, really help. But also, like I said, having some of those very clear kind of rituals and practices. How do you kind of prepare yourself for those conversations? And how do you then kind of detox your mind and body away from those? And those practices are actually quite similar to how you would treat PTSD, because we can actually get PTSD just from hearing other stories, right? So it's really reframing and thinking about that in a different point of view. But very difficult for me to say without kind of knowing individual scenarios and situations in terms of how, let's say, you would help other people and so on. But for me, I know what works is kind of having very clear boundaries, setting intention before I have those conversations, and having those little rituals to prepare myself before, and to kind of, I kind of say detox myself from it. What is my process that allows me to let go and release in a healthy way without carrying it on? So absolutely, we can really get burnt out by just simply listening to other people's heavy load. It's so important to have systems in place to protect yourself from that. Do you recommend a volunteer network within organizations? So it really depends. Some organizations set up beautiful partnerships with some other charities, with some volunteer organizations. There are also initiatives for employees to, let's say, go and volunteer for specific causes, which are amazing, because it really bonds people together and shows what they care about and their passions, and really highlights that. So there is a lot of initiatives that can be done to integrate volunteering within organizations. I don't know if that's what you mean, or you're asking if we're referring a very specific volunteer network to organizations. So I think in a broader context, I think a lot of initiatives with charities and a lot of initiatives, volunteering initiatives within organizations, can be really, really helpful to build that sense of community and allow people to kind of bring out their passions of support in that way. So wonderful. So any other questions? I'm just kind of skimming quickly. There's been quite a lot of comments. So I'm just want to make sure I answer everything, that I haven't missed anything. Great. Okay, so if you do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me or my team. We are always more than happy to share, as much of information, direction, resources as possible, direct you to the right supports. If you do feel like you have been somehow affected by this conversation or touched in, the good or the harmful way, again, please do not keep that to yourself. Please do reach out and share, and we can always send you some support and information, and we are here for you. And yeah, most importantly, I think really, let's take away with that message that suicide prevention does play an important role in organizational well-being strategy. However, that does not equal to just speaking about suicide and the actual prevention. It really needs to involve the kind of the wider ecosystemic risk assessment to understand how, to understand what is the state of well-being of our employees and how well our working environment supports it, or in what ways maybe it hinders or harms that, and what we can do then to take steps to prevent that from happening. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for listening. I will also put a link in a chat to a radio show with my interview this evening with Steve Phillip and his team. So if you have any insights after that or any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me and send those my way. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day and speak soon. Bye.